This book is a culmination of almost 3 years of work. Carl and I spent a lot of time together in these 3 years, and it contains over 1,300 postcard images. And every county and state of Kentucky is featured in here, between the years of 1900 and 1925. So there's a chapter on Grayson County. I think it's on page 158. And we'll be talking a lot about Grayson County and some other things tonight, and you can just follow along with us. Carl is the, as she noted, the premier collector of postcards in Kentucky. He has over 20,000 Kentucky postcards, all pre-1930. And so I'm going to turn it over to Carl for just a few minutes and let him talk a little bit.
Let me just tell you a little bit more about myself. This past Saturday, my high school graduating class in 1959 celebrated its 60th wedding, our 60th graduation anniversary. And speaking of weddings, last time I came, and I have spoken before here, many years ago, my wife did come with me for that. I don't remember what it was I spoke to you about. I'm sure it had to do with county history, but I recognized the building. I think it was the same room that we spoke in. But I have a disease known as myasthenia gravis, and been diagnosed with that by the Mayo Clinic about 2.5 years ago in Scottsdale, Arizona. So the reason I didn't stand while we had the pledge is because I do have balance issues, and as in addition to that, I wear sunglasses a lot because of the sensitivity my eyes feel whenever the lights are bright. But I'm doing well. It's just that when you get to be 77, a lot of times there's things that happen you don't expect, but I'm managing to get through it. And Robin has to help me a lot of times carrying things and getting from here to there. But having said that, I'd like for everyone to look in the introduction to this book at page XB11, I guess that's 18, in the introduction. So this is before we start the actual chapters with Adair County. XB11.
3 ones.
XB111, yes. And you'll see the picture of Litchfield's own W.L. VanNort. That is a postcard that is 3.5 by 5.5 inch, which is the size of postcards back in the day. And that was one of the cards in my collection that I value very highly because Mr. VanNort was very well known, in fact, rather famous in his day. And he was very well known in LaRue County. He had some relatives in LaRue County. And whenever Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft came to LaRue County to lay the cornerstone and dedicate the memorial building, he was there. And his photographs remain the best recollections or remembrances of that experience of any photographer in his day that was there. He did not come when Woodrow Wilson came in 1916. We're thinking, Robin and I were talking about it, and we noticed that Roosevelt and Taft were Republicans and Wilson was a Democrat. So maybe that was the reason. Maybe VanNort was a Republican.
We know that Grayson County is one of the few counties in Kentucky that tends to vote Republican. Isn't that correct? Overall?
But
One
thing we wanted you to do is to read the caption below the photograph of VanNort in his studio. And you'll notice, if you turn to the Grayson County section, you'll see on page 159, all 4 of those images were VanNort real photo postcards. And I think he did a few on pages 160 and 161. Another problem with this myasthenia gravis I was telling you about is it causes me to slur my speech a little bit. I didn't used to do that, but occasionally you'll notice that. But we are really proud of the Grayson County section, having that picture of St. Mary's Catholic Church on page 158. We tried to be as selective as we could to cover not just Litchfield, but we have two scenes of Grayson Springs on page 160, a downtown image of a rally scene in 1911 in Litchfield. My favorite one is the boy on the donkey on page 161. And the message that we have listed is exactly word for word what this little boy wrote on the back of the postcard when he mailed it. Now, do any of you remember Gay Hazel from Caneyville?
Yes.
Gay it was a pharmacist, as you all know, and his brother was best man in my wedding in Hodgenville. And I handled his estate when he passed away. And Gay was a dear friend. And he lived in Caneyville, right?
That's right.
Right, okay. So there's a scene, a street scene in 1907 of Caneyville. How it looked on the upper right corner of page 161.
Yeah, the road going up the hill is Highway 185, like you go to Bowling Green.
Oh, okay. And I'm a very passionate collector of railroad depot sign images. And Robin found that one for me, I believe, on the lower right corner of the page of Millwood. Now, the smaller the depots, usually they're the ones that are the rarest and most valuable. So that's the only one I've ever seen at Millwood. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sure. Two or three things I want to point out. To turn back to 159, how do you recognize a VanNort postcard? One of the ways is if you look at the two top postcards, you see that it says, for example, on the left, Grayson County Fairgrounds, and many of his postcards will have that kind of script, and it will almost look like it's on a piece of tape applied to the postcard, like that one is. And every time I see that and it's a Kentucky postcard, I automatically know it's probably VanNort. So if you're looking through some old local postcards and you see that, it's VanNort more than likely. He didn't always do that. Sometimes on the back of the postcards that he did, it will say VanNort, Litchfield, Kentucky on the left side. And sometimes the tape won't be there, but the tape thing is the telltale sign of a VanNort. And I want to say something about the horse racing postcard here. Now this is circa 1911 at the Grayson County Fairgrounds. And the fact that Mr. VanNort leaned out over the rail and waited for the horses to come to him and shot the photograph and froze the photograph and it's in focus is truly a testament to how amazing a photographer he was. Because that, with the equipment they had back then, was almost impossible to do. I don't know how he did it. That's probably one of the top 2 or 3 postcards in this book, in my opinion, because of that. What a difficult shot. I was doing some research this morning on W.L. VanNort online, and I found that 1904 was a difficult year for him in one way and a successful year for him in one way. He submitted a photograph to the St. Louis World's Fair in 1904 and won a prize. And if you look online, you'll find that this photograph is of a woman sitting at a spinning wheel, and she has a kerchief on her head, and she's smoking a pipe. So I guess at the St. Louis Fair, they thought that was unique enough to award it. And then I want to say something about the Millwood Card that Carl pointed out. The largest postcard show in America is held in York, Pennsylvania. Carl has been several times to it. We went once together, And then I went once by myself after that. And the year that we went together, I found this postcard from little Millwood, Kentucky, in a postcard box in York, Pennsylvania. And if you think about it, postcards were sent everywhere, you know. So we will go to York and find postcards from Elizabethtown, Cecilia, Hodgenville, Litchfield. It's amazing. So you never know where you might find one. Anybody have any, and I know this being a historical society, people in here know probably a lot more about VanNort than we do, but we're just obsessed with VanNort. And the other thing I was going to tell you about 1904 that was a bad thing for him, forgot that. What I read online said that several buildings burned in Litchfield in 1904. And it's the way it's stated, it was the W.L. VanNort photography building burned. So I don't know if he had a whole building that was his photography studio. It sort of reads that way. But so he won the big award in St. Louis, but his business burned down late in the year apparently. But I think he kept going after that, obviously. So on the front page of each chapter, we talk about the county and its history and how it was formed. And we talk about the county seat, which is Litchfield in this case. And then we talk about, in the third paragraph, we have the same scenario in each county. We talk about some of the quirky, compelling names of some of the post offices in that county. So I'm curious if any of you guys know where Fragrant is, which is one of the post offices that was here from 1893 to 1899. That's an unusual name. Lilac. It's interesting you had a Fragrant and a Lilac in the same county.
You know, Lilac Road.
Yeah. Yeah.
Church. You had a post office called Church.
Kirby's Corner
Love
area
that.
down
It's
here.
church.
Frank Church.
Yeah.
I was, it's kind of weird, I seen that and everything. I was sitting in my deer stand one morning, and your phone will turn on the location where you're at, and it said I was at church.
Was it on Sunday morning?
So I took it as a sign I need to get to the deer stand and get to
Yeah,
church.
if your pastor questioned
But it
you,
was in
I was in
Lowtown.
church.
It was in Lowtown, so I just wonder if that,
That's in the same area.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it is.
Anyway, those are fun. We came across some names like Lake Skillet in another county. Monkey's Eyebrow, some of you've heard of that.
yeah,
And,
I'm just Lexington.
Just a lot of great names. Can you think of any other offices?
I was going to ask if anyone has ever heard of Voodoo. Voodoo, W-O-O-D-O-O.
Voodoo?
Voodoo.
No, I never.
That's the one we mentioned at the very end. It didn't have a post office, so we were wondering, or I was wondering if anyone ever knew where that is or was, or. But like you said, I was watching TV one time, and we were having a comment on the weather, and my wife and I live in an obsolete little area known as Jericho. And they quoted Jericho is going to get some rain at 1:39. And we did.
It's a greasy spot in the road. It's not much of Jericho.
Right. But one thing I wanted you to do is, if you would, let's look at our county for a minute. Look at LaRue County, Mystic.
We have a hoodoo parlor. Do you live in hoodoo?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Perhaps it was misspelled in the guidebook we used.
Yeah.
It was spelled this way in the book we used.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's interesting.
The
Thank
W
you
could
for
be
pointing
made
that out.
into an H, it might be, if you didn't make it correctly, it might look
Right.
like an H.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
But if you look at LaRue County, that's on page 232. Now, all these counties are set out alphabetically, so that'll help you finding it. But look at 232. This is our county, and three of the images on the second page, page 233, were by Mr. VanNort. And we had a fire in 1914. Your fire was in 1904, right? If you look at the page 235, in the upper left, you'll see the Hodgenville vulcanizing business. And that place caught fire on the night of April 28, 1914. And they even had fire trucks come from as far away as Louisville to try to help put out the fire. Of course, they were too late. But it burned down about a third to a half of all the businesses and many residences in Hodgenville that night. Now, what we try to do is we try to include courthouses and depots, and we have a lot of hotels and sports scenes. But in LaRue County, we try to include Buffalo, and you see in the lower left corner on page 235, that was a Saturday afternoon in Buffalo, little tiny Buffalo.
Very small town, yeah.
Yeah. And there's a good covered bridge in the upper right of that page. There's a bridge there now, but of course it's not a covered bridge. And then we have a little street scene, a little town, a little doctor, Lee Maupin. Now if you look real close, you can see his dog seated there in the jalopy with him.
I want to point out something also on page 234 while we're there. If you look at the LaRue County Courthouse there in the bottom left, that almost looks like a painting. It is not. And you see throughout this book, colorized postcards. And let me explain what was going on there. The photographer there, his name was Albert Kramer, and we could talk some more about Albert Kramer. He did not come to Grayson County, but he covered a big part of the state. He was based in Cincinnati. And he would come to these small towns to take photographs. And he took this photograph of the LaRue County Courthouse on a glass negative. Now think about the early 1900s. And then he took that glass negative and shipped it to Germany, which was the premier place in the world to have things colorized because they had the technology and the equipment. This is pre-World War I. So in Germany, they would colorize what had been sent to them on a glass negative, and then postcards would be sent back to the little drugstore in Hodgenville, or to Buffalo, or to maybe Elizabethtown got a few, but most of them probably went to Hodgenville. So whenever you see something like that in this book, 9 times out of 10, it's a photograph that has been hand colorized by someone in Germany.
Let's look at Jefferson County now. Let's turn to page 209. How many of you think Muhammad Ali was the first heavyweight boxing champion from Louisville, Kentucky? I always did. For years and years, I always thought that. We found this card that's in Robin's collection of a man named Marvin Hart, and you can read what it says below in the caption below that card.
The fact that he defeated Jack Johnson, if any of you guys are boxing fans, Jack Johnson.
He was
like
great.
Mike
He was
Tyson
super great.
of the early 1900s.
He was the most outstanding boxer of his time.
Yeah.
But somehow this fella beat him in a split decision, I think.
He looks a little pudgy here, so
This was several years after his fighting weight, I think.
They took 20 rounds, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long.
He still has a pretty nose.
That's a long afternoon.
Now, if you turn that page, you'll see the layout we have on page 210 and 211. All 8 images are sports related, and each individual postcard image is quite rare. These are all real photo postcards, and many of them are one of a kind.
I love the Coca-Cola roller skate hockey team on page 211.
We'd never heard of roller skate hockey before. And now look at the next page, on page 212. Robin, I'm not having the best time getting my words out. tell them about this card and this card.
Okay, upper right on page 212, you see young medical students with the professor at University of Louisville Medical School, and they're examining a cadaver in circa 1909. So that's
I've never seen a postcard like that
that's
before.
very unusual. And then my favorite Jefferson County card is from my collections in the lower left, and the big flood in 1913, and every Kentucky town along the Ohio River was flooded, from Paducah all the way across. And these African Americans took advantage of the situation and went out and had a baptizing service in the middle of flooded streets of Louisville.
It has to be unique.
And that's,
Has to be
I
very
love that.
unique.
I love that.
And now look at the picture on your top left on page 213. There is the Confederate Monument that is down in Brandenburg. And the reason we decided to use this image is largely because of that. You could actually see the American Baking Company carriage, which in and of itself is a very rare image to have on a postcard. But to also have the Confederate Monument, and you can see that on your right, knowing that it's nearby now in Brandenburg is quite meaningful, I think.
I want to say something about the postcard craze itself of this period. Postcards really started coming in vogue about 1905, 1906, and by 1908, 1909, it was unbelievable how many postcards were sent through the mail. No television, no radio. They, of course, did have newspapers, but newspapers had very few images in them. So it was a really big deal if someone in Litchfield sent a postcard to her friend in Shepherdsville with a street scene from Litchfield on it. I mean, that kind of stuff wasn't available. I mean, it was huge. And people began to collect these and put them in books. And they would actually have postcard viewing parties where they would invite their friends over and look through all of the postcards. 50 miles in 1910 was a long way away. It was a far away place, So to get a postcard from home or from a friend, even from another state, was a big deal. And in our introduction, we talk about how many postcards were sent in the Christmas season.
And one thing that's interesting to know is that women sent many more postcards than men did. Many more. I think it's 3-1, wasn't it? Something like that.
Something like that.
I would like to ask you all to turn to page 336. That's Old Louisville County. Robin and I were in Old Louisville County about 3 weeks ago, and the postcard image on that one page is so special to me. I've never seen an image of a girls' athletic team posing with a boys' athletic team in the same image. That is so rare and so unique. Nobody up there had ever seen that image in Old Louisville County in LaGrange, and a lot of people really were excited to see that. One of the things I wanted to also tell you about is that the publisher of our book is Butler Books, and they are known as one of the top 2 book publishers in the state. They did the last book I did, Kentucky in the early 1900s. But unbeknownst to us, in the early part of the year, our book was submitted by Carol Butler, who owns the book publishing company. And we had no clue she was doing this. And it won #1 in the state of Kentucky, nonfiction. It was sent on to be in the national contest, and it came in 3rd in all of the southeastern states. So we were awarded a bronze medal for that. And we were invited to come to New York City to receive our medals and our certificates, but they weren't paying our transportation or our lodging or anything like that. So we opted not to do that. But we were so excited to know that. If we'd have come in fourth, we'd have never known about it. So we were delighted to come in third.
People often ask us, what's your favorite postcard of the book, since we wrote the book and it's 1,350 something images, I think. I know we're having you turn a lot, but if you turn to page 25, I'm going to show you mine. And Carl will tell you what his is. I'm fascinated by springs, and I know this is a county that has a deep heritage in Grayson Springs, which is something I'm very interested in, and maybe we should talk about it a little bit here in a minute. But in Bath County, there's a place called Olympian Springs. Same kind of deal, resort people came to restore their health. And in these grandiose hotels that were erected by these springs, sometimes they would have a house orchestra. They provided meals. I mean, it was a big deal. And people came from other states to Grayson Springs and to Olympian Springs and to mainly Dawson Springs, which Carl can talk about at length. But I love what this postcard has. Suckling pups and their mother, and it says meals at all hours, and it's advertising the Olympian Springs Resort. So it's on page 25. Yeah. So that's my favorite postcard in the book because I'm such a Springs interested in Springs so much.
The one on 24 is interesting too, the up lower left. New modern electric lighted hotel.
Yeah. Yes, it is. Yeah.
How much did it cost to mail these postcards way back
A
then?
penny. Well, our introduction goes into that. We spend a lot of time on our introduction, and it's usually a Benjamin Franklin green 1-cent stamp.
That's the reason they were called penny postcard.
Yes, and the postcards usually cost a penny too, by the way. Robin said that I would tell you my favorite postcard. Let's look at page 276.
Yes.
I have written an article about St. Mary's College that was in the book I did 4 or 5 years ago. And my favorite article was about St. Mary's College. But I'd never seen at that time the picture of the bowling team from that college. Just look at their uniforms and look how they arranged the pins and balls and all that. I mean, this was probably during the first few years of bowling, for all I know. But that is an amazing card. But if you want to see a nondescript card that I never thought I would ever see an image of, look at page 261 in the upper left, and you actually will see a man quail shooting with bird dogs at Salem. I mean, who would have thought to make a postcard out of that? But I value it highly. I think it's a really neat card.
Where do people, I mean, if we want a postcard today, we can find one at 5 and 10.
Right.
Where did they get their postcards? Did they go to the photographers?
Primarily the local drugstore.
The drugstore.
And we've seen pictures of the old glass display case, and it would have one of those tree-looking things on top of it you've seen that had postcards stuck in it, but it would be images from the local area that they would send out.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing, most postcards that you pick up and look at the back, it'll say something like, I mean, we have seen like catastrophe postcards, like a wrecked train on the front, or something really dramatic, and on the back it'll say, really nice weather today, and hope you all doing well. And the baby's sick, and we'll see you soon. And there's no reference. That's always so frustrating. Every once in a while you get some good information, and every once in a while you get some, what I consider some comical information. And one such card is on page 136 in Franklin County. And what we have here is a rare, real photo postcard of some prisoners in the Kentucky State Penitentiary in Frankfort. And one of the prisoners is riding home, and he says, "Hello, baby. Daddy is coming home tonight."
We're assuming baby is his wife.
Yeah.
You think he'd break it out?
I don't know. I'll take it.
He knew the day he was getting out. And you see, back in those days, this is the amazing thing. People could get a postcard and put it in the mail around 10 o'clock in the morning. And if you were in the big city, you could mail it to your wife and say, "Honey, the boss wants me to work 2 extra hours tonight. I won't be home till 6 o'clock, so have supper ready then." And it would be delivered within 3 or 4 hours. Yeah. You'd have as many as 4 deliveries a day in big cities and places like Dawson Springs and like that.
Carl, if you would share a little bit about Dawson Springs and about what was going on there in this period.
I wrote an article that is in the last book I did before this one about Dawson Springs, its mineral water, and baseball. Dawson Springs is the only Kentucky city or town that ever hosted a Major League Baseball team's spring practice. Kelly, did you know that?
Did not, Carl.
Yeah. And they had 4 or 5 train deliveries, mail deliveries, and passenger deliveries a day in Dawson Springs. And this was in the years 1914, 15, and 16. And the great player Honus Wagner was playing for Pittsburgh during those 3 years. And he was believed to be the greatest player at that time in all of the National League. And I got some postcards that show him helping train pre-teenage boys how to play baseball. And those cards are extremely valuable because it's the Honus Wagner tobacco card that is the most valuable
Baseball.
that exists today. And the last I knew, it sold for, the most pristine example of that card sold for between $1 million and $2 million.
For one card?
Gordie Howe or some, I think it was Gordie Howe. Anyway, one of the hockey players had that card at one time. And every time it sold, it went higher and higher.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a tobacco card before they did the bubble gum cards.
It's interesting that, 100 years is not really that long, really, I mean, but you think about Dawson Springs and how busy it was. Oh my goodness, trains coming in, people riding in on wagons, and early automobiles to play in the water, to drink the water, to bathe in the water, to just be around the water. And my wife and I made a trip to Paducah last year, and on the way back I said, I want to make sure we stop by Dawson Springs because I knew about this. Dawson Springs shows almost no evidence today that any of this ever happened. It's just, it looks like just another small Kentucky town, But just 100 years ago, what a place it was. Grayson Springs, a bustling place. And
Collegiate Springs in Edison County. It's another one. Collegiate Springs.
Carl gifted me recently he has several rare Kentucky bottles. And he gifted me recently a Grayson Springs bottle.
Hazel,
Back
that is.
from back in the day. And that's a treasure to me because of my interest in springs. I assume they were bottling water there and not some kind of carbonated beverage or anything. But
Sulfur water there.
The sulfur.
yeah.
We named our DAR chapter here, Grayson Springs, after them, and so we've been out there a few times, and,
Yeah.
oh, that water's terrible.
I
That
imagine
sulfur
so.
springs is something else.
My great aunt kept a jug of it in her refrigerator. Drank it all the time.
My buddy Pat Skees here is with us tonight. We play golf together all the time. And he and I went over to Sulphur Well to eat recently. I don't know if any of y'all have ever been there.
I know.
Oh, yeah. It's great. But we walked down to the edge of the waters, and same thing there. Sulphur water, stinking. The people really believed that that was the deal, and there were 2 hotels there, I believe.
Okay, let's do one other thing. Let's go to Montgomery County and look at the cards on page 317. Check it. Let's start off with the one at the bottom on the right. I don't know anything about it, but it sure is a unique picture of a little boy holding that tail of the horse.
That's a good horse.
And then look at the one right above it. You see the coach of the team with his son or grandson in the center, and it's the pride of the high school, Mount Sterling, postmarked in 1905. Now, if you find anything in 1905 or earlier like that, it's a keeper. It's really a rare card.
Yeah.
And then you see the one next to it, the Ewing Depot scene, Ewington, Kentucky. I have that card. I had it blown up to about 3 feet by 2 feet, double matted and framed. It had been in our dining room, but now, right now we have it down and we have another. I have about 5 postcards like this, one of Carrollton, one of Loretto and different places that are about this big, double banded and framed, and I would much rather have that on my wall than a Paul Sawyer print. And in fact, one of them, the one from Elkhorn Creek in Frankfort, is a photograph that's in this in Franklin County that we featured it in one of the chapters here, the one on Franklin County, and it looks just like a painting. We could probably turn to that one. Let's see. Let's turn to Franklin County, and it is on page. There it is, on page 134. We have that painting enlarged, and it lost none of its clarity whatsoever. It's really large, and it's double matted and framed.
But it's actually not a painting, it's one of those.
But it looks so much like a painting, and like
does.
Robin said, when Albert Kramer or some of these other photographers would have these glass negatives, and they would send them to Berlin, Germany. The people in Berlin, Germany, they had no clue what colors to put on things, other than to make the trees green and the sky blue and things like that.
They had to color them in reverse.
But they had, a lot of times what you saw,
They had to color them in reverse.
whenever they came
So
back,
green was not green.
okay,
Green was red.
okay. When they came back, they looked like an embellished version of the picture. They would look really more like a painting than a picture.
We could talk all night, but we'd be interested in hearing any questions you guys might have or comments or
What's
anything.
the oldest card you have?
1890s.
Yeah.
Glasses and all that. 1890s are the earliest.
Is that in this?
You won't find any earlier than that.
I don't think so.
What?
She asked if that was in this book.
No.
Have you ever seen a postcard of Black Rock?
I haven't, I don't believe.
Of what?
Black Rock?
Is that here in the county?
Yeah.
No.
I have a friend that has one from there.
Was there a post office there at Black Rock? And is it an actual photograph on the front of the postcard?
It's been so long since I've seen it, but I just remember there was postcards. My grandparents lived there, there's a railroad track, and we would see them, you know, hang the bag and
Yep.
grab the next bag.
Yeah, she was asking us about if you ever have a postcard and on the postmark it says RPO, that means Railway Post Office. And, you know, trains were huge in this period. And trains had post offices on board. And they would get stamped on the train. And they would hang those bags on those hooks, just like she mentioned, you know. And so that's what that is whenever you see RPO on the
And
back.
I think they carry guns to protect the mail too.
Probably do.
Let's look at one more. Let's look on page 112
Oh, that's one I heard.
in Edmonson County. You see that picture there of the gentleman and the lady on the donkey and all? We did some research and found out who he was. He was actually a very prominent medical doctor. But you look at the clothing and all, and you would never know that. It says, when will we three meet again?
Well, he was probably going through the cave.
But there are so many unique pictures.
Maybe.
When we went through Jefferson County's cards, for example, we had about 800 to 1,000 easily, and we narrowed it down to 20. So that was the process that we enjoyed doing, but there were so many we left on the cutting room floor, you know.
Were there many of the 30 floods?
Of what?
The 30 floods?
We don't do the 30s. We went from 1900 to 1925.
Okay.
37 flood.
But we had a lot of those, but they weren't in our area.
I mentioned this to Misty. We did a radio interview with her on Friday morning. And Carl amassed most of his postcards going to postcard shows in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. But today there aren't very many postcard shows. So I have gotten most of my collection. He has 20,000 cards. I have about 4,000. And Carl has mentored me graciously in the hobby. But I've gotten most of my postcards on eBay, online, because that's about the best place to find it.
They just don't have shows anymore.
Yeah.
Are there any postcard museums anywhere?
Postcard museums? Not around here. There are some in the big cities.
I've actually seen this house in Pike County.
The biggest one
I was
is
working up there
in Chicago,
archaeology
and they featured the most prolific number of cards, and they were known as Curtich, C-U-R-T-T-E-I-C-H, Curtich. And they started off in the 1890s or early 1900s, and they were pretty much worldwide. They have the biggest museum.
When I was in Butler, Massachusetts, in their museum, they had all these boxes of cards that you could buy. Look, they didn't know who they were. All these beautiful, beautiful photographs. It was phenomenal. And at the time, I didn't know. I skimmed through them, thinking maybe some of my, people would be in there, but they were great.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice to go back through those again. Yep.
Robin, you might want to tell them about how we got these seals here.
Yeah, we've stuck seals on here to commemorate the Ippy Award that we won, and just proud of that. These books sell for $60 at Barnes & Noble and other booksellers across Kentucky. And since we're the authors and cutting out the middleman, we're selling them for $50. And we're also throwing in this Lincoln book that Carl wrote a few years back, and you get both books for $50. So if you're interested in
And
buying.
we have our own sales tax number, so you go in sales tax.
Any other questions?
This is a silly question. In Clayton County, is that 76 fall still there?
Yes. No, I believe that Cumberland Lake. Let me look at it again. I checked on that. I believe that's now under.
Page 99.
We investigated so many cards in this book. I have a hard time remembering everything, but
I was just curious, because that would be interesting to go see if it's still around.
I don't believe it is. It may be, but I don't believe it is. And there was I believe there was a post office called 76. Maybe 76 Falls. I believe it was called 76. Anyone else? This has been a joy for us. We love to go out and do this and share our passion for these postcards. We always hope that people will bring some to the meetings and we can look through them. And thank you for bringing the Rosine card tonight. Enjoyed seeing that. So if we ever come back, you happen to have some old postcards that came out of Grandma's attic or whatever, bring them in, and we'll try to help you learn what we know about it or the value of them.